Hejin stared up at the massive crystal building that housed the Galactic Institute of Advanced Sciences. The morning sunlight from the three suns made the building shine in different colors. He had seen many pictures of the institute before, but nothing prepared him for how big it really was. "You must be the new Earth student," a friendly voice said behind him. Hejin turned around and saw a tall being made of blue crystal. The creature's body sparkled as it moved. "I am Professor Dorim. Welcome to our institute." Hejin bowed slightly, remembering his training about alien cultures. "Thank you, Professor. I'm Hejin from Earth. It's an honor to be here." The crystal professor's body changed color slightly, turning a warmer shade of blue. Hejin remembered from his studies that this meant happiness or approval among the crystal people. "You are our first Deathworlder student," Professor Durim said. "Many were surprised when you passed the entrance tests with such high scores." Hejin knew what the professor meant. Humans came from a planet that most alien species called a death world because it was so dangerous. High gravity, extreme weather, lots of diseases, and many natural disasters made Earth seem like a horrible place to most aliens. They often thought humans were just strong but not very smart. "Please follow me," Professor Durim said. "Class starts in 20 minutes, and I want to show you around first." As they walked through the halls, Hejin saw many different kinds of aliens. Some looked like floating clouds of gas. Others had many arms and legs. A few were so strange that Hejin couldn't even guess what he was looking at. Many of them stopped and stared at him. Some even moved away quickly when he got close. "Don't worry about their reaction," Professor Durim said. "Most of them have never seen a human in real life. They will get used to you." They reached a large classroom with seats arranged in a circle. Each seat had different settings to make different alien species comfortable. Hejin found his seat. It was marked with Earth gravity and atmosphere settings. "This is where you'll take advanced theoretical physics," Professor Durim explained. "We have students from 200 different species in this class. Each brings their own way of thinking about science." More students started coming into the classroom. A young woman with black hair walked in, and Hejin was surprised to see another human. She smiled and sat next to him. "Hi, I'm Jisoo," she said in Korean, which surprised Hejin even more. "I'm in my second year here. I saw your name on the class list and thought I should help you out. There aren't many of us humans around." Before Hejin could answer, Professor Dorim floated to the center of the room. The professor's crystal body now glowed with a soft light that got everyone's attention. "Welcome to Advanced Theoretical Physics," the professor said. "Today, we have a new student joining us. Hejin from Earth is our first Deathworlder student, and we are happy to have him here." Many students turned to look at Hejin. Some showed clear signs of fear or worry. Others seemed curious. A few, mostly the gas cloud aliens, moved their seats slightly farther away. "Today," Professor Durim continued, "we will discuss one of the greatest mysteries in galactic science. For 1,000 years, the brightest minds in the galaxy have tried to solve the quantum resonance paradox." The professor touched a control panel, and a large hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed complicated equations and strange symbols that Hejin had never seen before. "This paradox has stopped us from making many kinds of advanced technology," Professor Dorim explained. "If we could solve it, we could make faster spaceships, better computers, and even cure some diseases that still trouble us." Hejin looked at the equations carefully. Some parts looked familiar. They reminded him of things he had learned on Earth. Other parts were completely new to him. But something about the whole problem made him think differently about it than what he had learned in his Earth classes. Next to him, Jisoo noticed his interest. "Many students try to solve it," she whispered. "Nobody has come close in 1,000 years. Some people think it can't be solved." Hejin nodded, but his mind was already working on the problem. He saw patterns that reminded him of Earth's quantum physics. But there was also something about how the aliens wrote their equations that gave him new ideas. For homework, Professor Dorim said at the end of class, "Please read about the history of attempts to solve this paradox. Next week, we will discuss why these attempts failed." As other students left the classroom, the Jinn stayed in his seat, still looking at the equations that were now saved on his computer tablet. There was something about them that he couldn't stop thinking about. "You seem very interested in the paradox," Professor Dorim said, floating closer to He-Jin's seat. "Yes, Professor," He-Jin replied. "The way you write these equations is different from how we do it on Earth, but I think I see some connections." The professor's crystal body flickered with different colors: surprise, interest, and something else He-Jin couldn't identify. "Different perspectives are always valuable in science," Dorim said. "That's why we started accepting students from more worlds. But I should warn you, this paradox has defeated many great minds. Don't feel bad if you can't solve it." He-Jin smiled politely, but didn't say what he was thinking. He had already noticed something interesting about the paradox, something that reminded him of a problem his grandfather used to work on. His grandfather had been a physicist too, but he had also studied old Korean sciences that most people had forgotten. As He-Jin walked to his next class with Ji-Soo, his mind was still working on the problem. He didn't know it yet, but he had just taken the first step toward changing how the galaxy thought about humans and science forever. That evening, in his room at the student housing building, He-Jin spread out his notes and started working. He wrote equations both in the Earth way and in the alien way he had learned today. Something was forming in his mind, not a solution yet, but the beginning of an idea. Outside his window, the three suns were setting, painting the sky in strange colors he had never seen on Earth, but He-Jin hardly noticed. His mind was focused on the puzzle that had stumped the galaxy for 1,000 years. And somewhere in the mix of his Earth knowledge and these new alien ideas, he felt sure there was an answer waiting to be found. 2 weeks had passed since He-Jin's first day at the Galactic Institute. He sat in the library late one evening, surrounded by both paper books from Earth and alien data crystals. The library was almost empty, except for a few gas cloud students floating near the ceiling and a silicon-based librarian organizing data crystals. Ji-Soo found him there, just as she had every evening that week. "Still working on the paradox?" she asked, sitting down across from him. "You know, Professor Dorim didn't expect anyone to actually try solving it. It was just supposed to be an example." He-Jin looked up from his notes. "But that's what makes it interesting," he said. "Everyone thinks it can't be solved, so they've stopped really trying. They just follow the same old ways of thinking about it." Ji-Soo leaned forward to look at his notes. He-Jin had written his calculations in a mix of Earth mathematics and alien symbols. "What's different about how you're looking at it?" she asked. "Well," He-Jin said, turning his tablet so she could see better, "aliens always start with crystal harmonics because that's how their computers work. But on Earth, we learn to do quantum calculations differently because our computers evolved from silicon chips." He pointed to a series of equations. "And look at this part. The aliens think this is impossible because energy can't flow this way in their models. But on Earth, we discovered something similar when studying deep-sea volcanic vents. Sometimes energy does strange things under extreme conditions." Ji-Soo's eyes widened as she followed his calculations. "This actually makes sense," she said slowly. "Have you shown this to Professor Dorim?" He-Jin shook his head. "Not yet. I want to be sure first. There's something else too." He pulled out an old book he had brought from Earth. "My grandfather gave me this. It's about ancient Korean scientists who studied energy flows in nature. Everyone thought their ideas were just philosophy, not real science. But when I combined their ideas with modern physics, their conversation was interrupted by Professor Yumi, a silicon-based professor who had taken a Korean name. She had been floating nearby, her crystalline form shifting colors with interest as she listened. "I couldn't help but overhear," she said, her voice creating gentle vibrations in the air. "Your approach is unusual. Most students try to use pure mathematics or crystal harmonics, but you're combining different kinds of science. He-Jin nodded respectfully. Yes, Professor. Earth has many different scientific traditions. Some are very old, some are new. I think maybe we need all of them to understand this problem. Professor Yoon-hee's body flickered with thoughtful colors. Interesting. Very interesting. Would you present your ideas in tomorrow's advanced theory discussion group? We encourage students to share new approaches, even if they're not complete solutions. He-Jin felt nervous but excited. I would be honored, Professor. The next day, He-Jin stood before a small group of students and professors in a circular discussion room. His hand shook slightly as he connected his tablet to the room's hologram system. Jisoo sat in the front row, giving him an encouraging smile. Traditional galactic science, He-Jin began, sees quantum resonance as a crystal-based phenomenon. But on Earth, we learned about quantum effects differently because our planet has such extreme conditions. He showed a hologram of Earth's deep oceans. In places like this, where pressure is incredibly high and different forms of energy meet, we see patterns that everyone thought were impossible. Our ancestors noticed these patterns thousands of years ago, but they described them differently. Professor Do-rim floated forward, colors swirling with interest. Are you suggesting that your ancestors understood quantum mechanics before they had modern technology? Not exactly, He-Jin explained. They understood patterns in nature. They didn't have our equations, but they saw how energy moved and changed. Modern physics proved many of their observations were correct, even if they explained them differently. He changed the hologram to show his new equations. If we combine their understanding with modern Earth physics and galactic science, the paradox looks different. See this part here. Everyone assumes these energy flows have to follow crystal patterns, but what if they follow organic patterns instead? The room grew very quiet. The gas cloud students condensed with concentration, a sign of deep thought in their species. The crystalline professors vibrated with various colors of surprise and interest. This is highly unorthodox, Professor Do-rim said finally, but it deserves investigation. Keep working on this, He-Jin. You may be onto something important. After the presentation, students crowded around He-Jin, asking questions. Even some who had avoided him before now wanted to understand his ideas. A group of gas cloud students offered to share their own species' ancient science texts, wondering if they might contain similar useful patterns. Later that evening, He-Jin and Jisoo sat in the student lounge, drinking Earth-style tea that Jisoo's family had sent her. You've got everyone thinking differently now, Jisoo said. I heard some crystal students talking about studying Earth physics. They've never been interested in our science before. He-Jin smiled. That's good. Maybe we all need to learn from each other more. The paradox is like a puzzle where every species has some of the pieces, but we've never put them all together. He looked out the window at the 3 moons rising in the alien sky. Somewhere in his mind, pieces were starting to come together. The paradox was beginning to look less impossible and more like a challenge that just needed a new way of thinking. Tomorrow, he said, I'm going to start combining everything we know. Earth physics, galactic science, ancient wisdom, and maybe something new too. There's an answer here somewhere, and I think I'm getting close to finding it. Jisoo watched him with a mixture of admiration and concern. Just be careful, she said. Some professors won't like having their old ideas challenged, especially not by a Deathworlder. He-Jin nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead to the next step in his calculations. The answer was close. He could feel it. And when he found it, it would change everything, not just about the paradox, but about how the galaxy saw humans and Earth science. As the evening grew late, He-Jin returned to his room and spread out his notes once again. On his tablet, equations from 3 different scientific traditions glowed side by side. In his old book, diagrams drawn by ancient Korean scientists seemed to hint at truths that modern physics was only beginning to understand. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, He Jin felt more certain than ever that he was on the right path. The thousand-year-old paradox had met its match in a combination of knowledge no one had tried before: the physics of a death world, the wisdom of the ancients, and the science of the stars. The morning of the breakthrough began like any other day at the Galactic Institute. Professor Do Rim's advanced theoretical physics class was discussing different attempts to solve the quantum resonance paradox throughout history. The holographic display in the center of the room showed complex equations floating in the air. He Jin sat in his usual seat, but today he could barely stay still. He had been up all night, working on his calculations. Everything had finally clicked together in his mind just before sunrise. Now, as Professor Do Rim explained another failed solution attempt from 300 years ago, He Jin checked his notes again and again. As you can see, Professor Do Rim was saying, the Zentaran approach failed because crystal harmonics cannot maintain stability in these conditions. This has been proven repeatedly over the centuries. He Jin's hand shot up before he could stop himself. His heart was beating fast, and his voice shook slightly with excitement. Professor, he said, what if we're all thinking about it backward? The professor's crystalline form sparkled with surprise colors. Please explain. He Jin stood up and walked to the central platform. His hands trembled as he connected his tablet to the hologram system. The room grew quiet as his calculations appeared in the air. We keep trying to make energy flow like it does in crystals, he said. But on Earth, we learned that energy sometimes follows organic patterns instead. Look at this. He brought up an image of ocean currents. Energy in living things moves like water, not like crystal vibrations. Professor Do Rim floated closer to examine the equations. Interesting, but how does this help with the paradox? Because, He Jin said, now bringing up his new calculations, if we combine Earth's organic energy patterns with galactic crystal science, something amazing happens. Watch this. He entered a new set of equations, the hologram change, showing energy flows that looked like a mix between ocean currents and crystal patterns. Several students gasped. A group of gas cloud aliens condensed so quickly they nearly turned to liquid. Traditional galactic science says energy can't flow this way. He Jin continued. But on Earth, we see it happen all the time in deep-sea volcanic vents. The extreme conditions there break the usual rules. And look what happens when we add the patterns that ancient Korean scientists observed. He added another layer to his calculations. The hologram shifted again, and suddenly all the pieces fit together perfectly. The equation that had puzzled the galaxy for 1,000 years resolved itself before their eyes. Professor Do Rim's crystal body began cycling through colors so quickly it looked like a rainbow. This is impossible, the professor whispered. But the equations didn't lie. They showed a clear, elegant solution that no one had ever seen before. It's not impossible, He Jin explained. We just needed to look at it differently. Earth is what you call a death world because it has such extreme conditions. But those conditions taught us things about energy and matter that you can't learn on safer worlds. The room erupted in excitement. Students began talking all at once. Several professors who had been observing the class rushed forward to examine the equations more closely. Professor Yoon Hee's silicon form vibrated with such intensity that she had to steady herself against a wall. But how did you think to combine these different approaches? Professor Do Rim asked, still cycling through amazed colors. My grandfather, He Jin said. He was a physicist, but he also studied ancient Korean science. He taught me that old wisdom and new knowledge can work together. The ancient scientists didn't have our technology, but they saw patterns in nature that we're only now beginning to understand. Jisoo stood up from her seat, her face glowing with pride for her fellow human. He Jin has been working on this for weeks, she told the class. He's been combining science from Earth, from the galaxy, and from our ancestors. Nobody else thought to put all these pieces together. Professor Yoon, he finally steadied herself enough to speak. This is more than just solving the paradox, she said. This is a whole new way of thinking about energy and matter. It could change everything we know about physics. The news spread through the institute faster than light speed. Within hours, every professor and student had heard about what happened in advanced theoretical physics class. The solution to the thousand-year-old paradox had come not from a major research project or a famous laboratory, but from a human student combining different kinds of knowledge in a new way. Later that day, He Jin sat in Professor Dorim's office, surrounded by excited professors from different departments. They had been reviewing his solution for hours, checking every detail, and finding no flaws. "Your solution works perfectly," Professor Dorim said, "but it's going to cause quite a stir in the scientific community. Many people won't want to believe that a human student solved something that has puzzled our best minds for 1,000 years." He Jin nodded. "I understand, but the math proves itself. And really, I didn't do it alone. I had help from Earth physics, from galactic science, from ancient wisdom, and from everyone who tried to solve it before. I just saw how all the pieces could fit together." As he left the office that evening, students and professors stopped to congratulate him. Even the aliens who had once avoided him now wanted to talk about his ideas. The gas cloud students were especially excited, floating around him in happy swirls as they discussed how his solution might apply to their own scientific problems. In his room that night, He Jin sent a message to his grandfather back on Earth, telling him about the breakthrough. Then he looked out at the 3 moons shining in the alien sky and thought about how much more there was to learn. His solution hadn't just solved a paradox. It had opened up new questions and possibilities that no one had imagined before. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. He knew some people would doubt him or try to disprove his solution. But tonight, He Jin felt at peace. He had shown that being from a death world wasn't a disadvantage. It was a source of unique wisdom. And maybe, just maybe, his breakthrough would help humans and aliens work together more closely to solve the mysteries of the universe. As he fell asleep, his tablet still glowed with the equations that had changed galactic science forever. In his dreams, he saw energy flowing like ocean currents through crystal patterns, creating new forms that no one had ever seen before. The 1,000-year paradox was solved, but He Jin knew this was just the beginning of something much bigger. News of He Jin's solution spread through the Galactic Institute like a wildfire. By the next morning, every communication screen in the building was showing his equations. Students gathered in groups, discussing what this meant for galactic science. Professors held emergency meetings to discuss the implications of his discovery. Dr. Sunwoo, one of the most respected physics professors in the galaxy, called for an immediate meeting of the Institute's Science Council. His crystalline form glowed dark red with concern as he addressed the other professors. "This is impossible," Dr. Sunwoo said, his voice sharp with worry. "Humans must have known this solution all along. They kept it secret until now to make us look foolish." Professor Dorim floated forward, colors showing disagreement. "I watched He Jin develop this solution over weeks. He combined knowledge in ways we never thought to try. There was no deception." In another part of the institute, He Jin sat in a small meeting room with Ji-Soo and Professor Mai-Ray, a young faculty member who had supported his work from the beginning. The professor's plasma form glowed softly as she showed them messages arriving from other scientific institutions across the galaxy. "Everyone wants to know more about your solution," Professor Mai-Ray said. "But some are afraid of what it means. They don't want to admit that their basic assumptions about physics might be wrong." Ji-Soo put a comforting hand on He Jin's shoulder. "They're not just questioning your solution," she said. "They're questioning everything they thought they knew about humans and Deathworlders." He Jin nodded, looking at the messages flowing across the screen. Some were excited about his discovery. Others were angry or suspicious. Many demanded more proof that his solution worked. "I can prove everything," he said quietly. "The math is clear, and we can test it in the laboratory." Professor Mai-Ray's glow brightened with approval. "That's exactly what we'll do. I've already set up the main physics lab for testing. We'll show everyone that your solution works." Meanwhile, in the Institute's grand meeting hall, more professors had gathered to debate the situation. Dr. Sunwoo had brought supporters, all of them worried about what this discovery meant for galactic science. "Think about it," one crystalline professor said. "If a human student could solve this, what else might they discover? They come from a world we thought was too dangerous for advanced civilization. What if we were wrong about everything?" Professor Yoon-hee spoke up, her silicon form steady and calm. "Maybe being wrong is good. Science is about learning new things, not protecting old ideas. He-jin showed us that different kinds of knowledge can work together. Isn't that exciting?" The debate grew more heated. Some professors wanted to test He-jin's solution immediately. Others wanted to keep it secret until they could study it more. A few even suggested that humans should not be allowed to study at the Institute anymore. While the professors argued, He-jin worked in the physics lab with Professor Mai and a team of student volunteers. They set up equipment to test his solution in real conditions. Ji-soo helped too, recording everything carefully so no one could question their results. "Look at this," He-jin said, pointing to the energy patterns forming in their test equipment. "It's exactly what the equations predicted. Energy can flow like water through crystal structures if we set up the right conditions." Professor Maire's plasma form pulsed with excitement. "This could change everything. Faster spacecraft engines, better quantum computers, new types of medicine. Your solution makes all of these possible." Word of their successful tests spread quickly through the Institute. More students came to watch, including some who had doubted He-jin before. The gas cloud students were especially interested, floating close to observe the energy patterns that looked so much like their own natural forms. But in his office, Dr. Sunwoo was making urgent calls to other scientific institutions across the galaxy. "We need to be careful," he told them. "This human solution threatens everything we thought we knew. We need to study it more before we let anyone use it." Professor Do-rim heard about these calls and went to talk with He-jin. The professor's crystal form showed concerned colors. "Some people are afraid of change," Do-rim explained. "They spent their whole lives believing one way of thinking was right. Your solution shows them a different way, and that's scary for them." He-jin understood, but he wasn't worried. "The truth is the truth," he said. "We can prove the solution works. And once people see what it can do, they'll understand why combining different kinds of knowledge is important." That evening, He-jin received a message that surprised him. The Galactic Science Council wanted him to present his solution to them in person. This was a great honor, but also a big challenge. The council would test his solution carefully and ask many hard questions. Ji-soo found him in the library, preparing for his presentation. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "A little," He-jin admitted. "But I'm more excited. This is a chance to show everyone that humans have something valuable to add to galactic science. Maybe after this, they'll stop seeing Earth as just a dangerous planet and start seeing it as a place where different kinds of wisdom come together." As they worked on his presentation, more students came to help. The gas cloud students offered their understanding of fluid dynamics. Crystal students helped explain how energy moved through solid structures. Each species added their own knowledge, making the presentation stronger. Professor Mai watched this collaboration with growing happiness. Her plasma form glowed brighter and brighter. "This is what real science looks like," she told Professor Do-rim. "Different minds working together, sharing what they know, finding new answers." He-jin didn't just solve a paradox. He showed us a better way to work together. The story of He-jin's discovery had started a change that would affect the whole galaxy. Some fought against this change, holding on to their old beliefs. Others welcomed it, excited about new possibilities. But everyone knew that things would never be quite the same again at the Galactic Institute of Advanced Sciences. The main hall of the Galactic Science Council was larger than anything He-jin had ever seen. The ceiling seemed to stretch up forever, and the walls were made of living crystal that changed colors with the mood of the room. Representatives from every major scientific institution in the galaxy sat in rising circles, all looking down at where He Jin stood with his presentation materials. Chairperson Ta-Wan, a being made of pure energy who had chosen a Korean name to honor Earth's scientific achievements, floated at the center of the council. "We are here today," the chairperson announced, "to examine a solution to the quantum resonance paradox presented by He Jin of Earth, a student at the Galactic Institute of Advanced Sciences." He Jin took a deep breath. In the audience, he could see Professor Do Rim and Professor Myray sitting with other teachers from the institute. Jisoo sat with a group of student representatives, giving him an encouraging smile. Even Dr. Sunwoo was there, his crystal form showing complex patterns of doubt and interest. "Honorable Council," He Jin began, "I want to show you not just a solution, but a new way of thinking about science." He activated the hologram system, and his equations appeared in the air above him. "For 1,000 years, we tried to solve this paradox using only one kind of knowledge. But the answer comes from combining different ways of understanding the universe." As He Jin explained his solution, the hall grew very quiet. He showed how Earth's extreme conditions had taught humans different ways to think about energy. He demonstrated how ancient Korean scientists had seen patterns that modern physics was only beginning to understand. He explained how combining these ideas with galactic crystal science created something new and powerful. "We can prove this works," He Jin said, showing recordings from the laboratory tests. "Energy flows like this in Earth's deep oceans. It moves this way in crystal structures. When we combine these patterns, we get something that neither Earth science nor galactic science could create alone." Questions came from all directions. Scientists from hundreds of worlds wanted to know more. He Jin answered each question carefully, showing how his solution connected to different scientific traditions. Dr. Sunwoo floated forward. "But how can we be sure this solution is safe?" he asked. "It comes from a death world. Everything there is dangerous." He Jin smiled gently. "That's exactly why it works," he said. "Earth taught us to look for answers in unexpected places. Life finds ways to survive in our deepest oceans, in our highest mountains, even in pools of acid. These extreme conditions showed us things about energy and matter that you can't learn on safer worlds." Professor Myray spoke up from her seat. "We've tested this solution extensively," she said. "It's not just safe, it's more efficient than anything we've tried before. He Jin's approach could help us solve many other problems too." Chairperson Ta-Wan floated down to examine the equations more closely. The energy being's form glowed with different colors as it studied He Jin's work. Finally, it turned to address the council. "In all my years," the chairperson said, "I have never seen a solution that brings together so many different kinds of knowledge so beautifully. This young human hasn't just solved our paradox. He has shown us a new path forward for galactic science." The council chamber erupted in discussion. Scientists from different worlds began talking about how this new approach might help solve their own problems. Even Dr. Sunwoo's colors had changed, showing reluctant acceptance as he studied the laboratory results. Therefore, Chairperson Ta-Wan announced, "The Galactic Science Council officially recognizes He Jin's solution to the quantum resonance paradox. Furthermore, we recommend that all scientific institutions begin incorporating Earth science and similar perspectives from other Deathworld cultures into their research programs." After the announcement, everything changed quickly. The Galactic Institute created a new department dedicated to combining different scientific traditions. Professor Myray was chosen to lead it, with He Jin and Jisoo helping to design the research programs. Dr. Sunwoo surprised everyone by asking to join the new department. "I was wrong," he told He Jin. "I thought being from a death world was a disadvantage. Now I see it gave you a unique way of looking at the universe. We have much to learn from each other." The institute began accepting more students from Earth and other death worlds. The gas cloud students started a project to study fluid dynamics in Earth's oceans. Crystal students began learning about Earth's geological processes. Everyone was excited to share knowledge and find new connections between different scientific traditions. One evening, a month after the council meeting, Ho Jin stood with Ji Su on the Institute's observation deck. They watched the three suns setting while students from a dozen different worlds worked together in the laboratories below. "Did you ever think solving the paradox would change so much?" Ji Su asked. Ho Jin shook his head. "I just wanted to understand how things worked," he said. "But maybe that's what we all want, no matter what world we come from. We just need to learn how to share our different ways of seeing things." Professor Dorim floated up to join them, the crystal being's colors showing peace and satisfaction. "You've started something important, Ho Jin," the professor said. "Not just in science, but in how we think about each other. Every world, even the ones we thought were too dangerous, has something to teach us." In the labs below, new discoveries were already being made. Students and professors from different worlds worked together, combining their knowledge in ways no one had tried before. The 1,000-year paradox had been just the beginning. Now, with minds from across the galaxy working together, sharing their wisdom and experience, there was no telling what mysteries they might solve next. Hejin smiled as he watched a group of New Earth students arriving at the Institute. They looked nervous but excited, just as he had been on his first day. They didn't know yet that they carried valuable knowledge from their dangerous, beautiful world. Knowledge that might help solve the next great puzzle of the universe. The three suns finally set, and the stars came out, thousands of them, each one hosting worlds with their own wisdom to share. In the growing darkness, the Institute's laboratories glowed with light and energy as students from Earth worked alongside beings of crystal, gas, and pure energy, all of them learning from each other, all of them working together to understand the mysteries of the universe. And somewhere in those laboratories, someone was probably already working on the next impossible problem, ready to solve it in a way no one had ever imagined before.